Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode in season 6 of Culture Club X, powered by Culture Monkey. I'm your host, Darcy Mehta. Culture Monkey is an AI-powered enterprise employee engagement platform that helps people leaders listen to their employees and enhance workplace cultures. Culture Club X is our global thought leadership forum where global CHROs and people leaders share insights, discuss trends, and exchange proven strategies for building thriving, future-ready cultures. And today, we're truly honored to host Nadia Vatalidis, Head of People at Doist. Nadia, welcome. It's lovely to have you here with us.
Thanks so much, Darcy. Yeah, great to be here. Excited to chat today.
Yes, definitely. And Nadia brings over a decade of hands-on expertise scaling remote-first organizations across continents. At Doist, she leads people strategy and culture for a fully distributed team of 100 plus people across 35 plus countries, supporting 50 million users worldwide. She previously grew remote.com from 70 to 1,000 employees in 80 plus countries and GitLab from 75 to 1,300 in 60 plus countries, playing a key role in GitLab's successful IPO. Originally from South Africa, Nadia also advises companies like PIN and is known for creating remote onboarding systems and social connections that have become industry benchmarks. Nadia, your global experience with distributed teams is exactly the right perspective we need right now. And we are so excited to have you here to discuss our latest topic, from skills chaos to AI edge, actionable reskilling and engagement for global teams. Before we dive fully into our questions, could you just share a bit about your own leadership journey?
Yeah, absolutely. Darcy, I am so fortunate and privileged to work out here from Johannesburg in the tech SaaS industry and product space. And now you're at Doist, really a lot more meaningful growth. So although we're a tiny and mighty team of 100, we are building the world's #1 task management app called Todoist, and it's just been such an incredible journey to be a part of. We've already launched a bunch of really interesting AI tools and features and working on more. But all that being said, it all starts internally, right? It all starts with how you're working with your current employees and your global teams in how to leverage that. So yeah, that's where I'm at currently. And yeah, really excited to chat about this topic today.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations. Everything you've done is so inspirational. You made me feel motivated. Okay, so let's get straight into the discussion. So, how do you detect resistance to reskilling in AI-driven job redesigns before it impacts team morale?
Great question. I think maybe we should just normalize the fact that we're all living in a world where there's so much uncertainty and many companies don't know the answer, right? We all know we're going through this major AI global transformation in all aspects of it, right? So no matter what job you're doing, in some shape or form, it feels like it's going to impact that. And I think I always tend to start in meeting people there. Like, where are they currently? How are they feeling about these changes? What are their fears? What are their greatest ambitions while they're going through this? And I think at Doist, something we did really early on was to start figuring out what this would look like. How do we, like at Doist, how do we create a really safe space to experiment and play and not move away from our incredible company values, which we've operationalized and worked on, but also like, what are the behaviors we're looking for next as we enter this era? And so we started a little bit earlier, and I think it all started with creating a very safe space to openly speak about fears, awareness of roles, what could change, and making space for that honest conversation. So that's where we got started. I think companies that's gone into this with a very rigid approach is probably finding a lot of their people operating in a very compliant way, right? And just trying to meet expectations versus really seeing this as this massive opportunity and challenge and rethinking how work can work in their team, company, industry, etc. And so I think it starts sort of with the people and culture side, psychological safety 101.
Very true. You touched on so many great points right there. I like how you first said, let's normalize uncertainty because we're all feeling like that. We don't know what's going to change, how it's going to affect you. So, like you said, creating that safe space is so key. And I mean, I'm in the creative field myself. I've felt that before and felt like, who can I talk to? How can you, vent? And you worry about these tools and things. So I think that's, great advice for sure. So, what's holding leaders back from measuring reskilling success through business tied goals like cycle time improvements?
I think it starts with, have they involved their teams? So I like to, when I'm going through a change, and I'm very lucky to be working in an environment where it's completely egalitarian, right? So we all operate in a non-dictative way. We all get to challenge, provide ideas, work in a very autonomous, innovative culture at Doist. But I think it starts with, how are you involving the people in your team? If you tell someone on your team, give me an opportunity to rethink what this process could look like if we had to apply automation or integration or AI or whatever that looks like. The moment you involve the person, the buy-in transforms. It literally changes the person's perspective about what they're experiencing. I think one of the things that's holding a lot of leaders back is they not doing that. If they themselves are feeling uncertain, they nearly want to show up with this perfect answer and this, complete view and thought leadership of what's to come, even though they don't know that answer. Many people don't, right? And so I think it's okay to involve people from the ground up to start rethinking what that can look like in their team, specific role, specific process, etc. if you go really granular into that. But I also think leaders that get very stuck on a process that's maybe served them for a decade or whatever the case may be, I think that's going to be a huge holdback. If you just reimagine, if you had 55 steps to do something, and with AI, you could do it potentially in 10. If you have the opportunity to rethink that versus it being delegated to you, right? I think it can be so much more transformational and exciting and creative to work on versus it just being sort of top down. So I think that is an element of holdback. I also just think a lot of leaders don't have the skills, don't understand the behaviors yet of what they need as leaders to go into this era. And although we need to start there, we need to start developing leadership around what kind of behaviors are we looking for, what kind of influence buy-in are they creating. Many companies haven't even done that, right? I think they started with technical skills enablement and soft skills enablement versus like, hold on, what behaviors do we need? How are we going to change people's minds as we go through this?
Absolutely. That's so true. And you're right about, it's easy for leaders that you get stuck with what's been working, what worked in the past. But like you said, I mean, something that took 55 steps might take 5 steps now or something like that. So it is like, learning to also pivot, to be flexible and adapt too. So important.
Yeah.
So, what is the impact of manager as coach practices in driving bite-sized reskilling loops such as peer-led sessions?
Yeah, great question. So if I think about the world of skills and competencies, I always think about performance, right? So if you think about performance methods that you build in the world of people and you think how people behave, what's the hardest thing to change? It's still behavior. And so as leaders start focusing on skills and competencies, I nearly want them to just pause there for a second and roll back, zone out a little bit and start looking at what behaviors do they have on their team? Who needs more coaching? Whose mind do they need to change about what's going to happen next, right? And how to rethink their process role, etc. And so that buy-in that they can create at that from a coaching perspective at that level is going to be so much more transformational than just teaching someone how to use Claude Code or how to do better prompting skills, or because those kind of things are just getting better and better anyway. To learn skills and competencies for any human being is absolutely easier than to change a behavior or to change a mindset. And so if someone has a very rigid or very closed mindset and not open-minded, it can be a really difficult time for them, but also for their leader, to help unblock them and to help rethink their work, as I mentioned earlier, like reimagining what a process, etc., can look like. And I think for leaders, it's not going to go onto that journey and start coaching the folks on their team to think through adaptability, think through what mindset changes needs to happen for them to learn and even be open to these skills. I think those are the kind of teams that, I hate to use this word, but that will be winning, right? Mm-hmm. That will be used as great examples in companies of what adaptability looks like, versus staying stuck, right? And just trying to add technical skills on top of a very closed mindset.
Absolutely. And, it makes such perfect sense with the way you explain it, but it's shocking how many, might not be thinking along that line or haven't done that. And you're right. I mean, we can all learn the new skills. I mean, you can study, you can take a little course, you can learn those skills, but the mindset is very huge in the behavior, like you said. So I think that's so, definitely needs to be first and foremost for sure. So how have you transitioned from reactive upskilling to a durable skills architecture, layering meta skills like AI fluency and coaching onto role-specific needs?
Great question. So last year, we had this opportunity to rethink our entire career framework. So if you imagine how different levels in the company work and how job descriptions work and what expectations we have of every job and every level in the company, we actually first started there. So before we touched technical skills and skills transfers and AI lightning talks and all these fun things, we first focused on, let's create a very equitable and very clear expectation of what we expect of every person that works at Doist in every level at the company. And so bringing that into one space instead of a hyper granular per job space actually helped create a very equitable experience from engineers to marketers to people team members to finance team members, right? So no matter what you do at the company, if you're an individual contributor 3, you would have a certain impact that you needed to achieve, and it was clearly described, and you would have a level description of what an individual contributor 3 means at our company. And so if you start with something that's less granular, right, you can really build on top of that. When you start adding a lot of complexity to that, it becomes very difficult to then get into the technical skills development aspects of things. So we really actually first consolidated things, removed fluff, like removed over complexity, and started focusing on equitable, fair career framework. So everyone at the company understands what that means. And then on top of that, we initially started really casually to just introduce AI lightning talks. And a lightning talk means a 5 to 15 minute conversation that's really a show and tell, right? On an amazing engineer that's built something and showing how they built it, what happened, what worked, what didn't work, and leaving space for everyone else to ask questions and then answering those questions. But we didn't just do this with engineers. We actually did this across the entire company with non-engineers as well. And one perfect example of this was one of my colleagues in the people team, Andrew, is a non-engineer at Doist. He had created a Gemini gem. And this is in Google, the platform, right? Gemini is one of their products, and we have access to Gemini Pro. And he had built a gem to help people coach and soundboard their feedback to each other. So this was before our performance review process. And it was fascinating to see what he could feed that gem. So he was able to use the company values. He was able to use our documentation of what feedback is like at Doist, our career framework, our performance review process, as well as how we've operationalized our company values. And he took all of that so that there's no hallucinations or advice outside of that, right? And he really prompted this gem to say, based on this documentation, help me soundboard feedback that I need to give to a peer or manager or someone else that works here. And it was just fascinating to see a non-engineer utilizing AI in that way. We're only, he's a people business partner. I'm head of people. We're 2 people supporting the entire company when it comes to people business partner work. So whether that comes to performance review cycles or employee relations or difficult conversations. So scaling that a little bit to have a coach built in a Gemini gem meant that he was literally leveraging AI to scale his own ability, right? Because it's coaching based on our documentation that we built for Doist. It's not coaching based on the general internet. And so I think through these AI lightning talks, we were able to truly build in a little bit of trust, curiosity, and innovation. And other people started experimenting quite a bit through that. We expanded those talks and invited more and more people to come and do a live show and tell AI lightning talk. And I think it created space for people to even make mistakes. Some of the engineers were vulnerable enough. Yeah, they were vulnerable enough to say, okay, and then Claude Code said whatever, and I had no idea what that meant, right? And it was just so human, so kind, so it really created that safe space to say, it's okay if it doesn't work. Let's try something else, right? And also watching people use plain English, right? And not necessarily a coding language to go about these things definitely created way more accessibility across the company than just having engineers present to engineers. Yeah.
That's amazing. Wow. I want to work there. I love this. I love this idea. And the lightning talks is such a great way, like you said, to build that, a little excitement, that curiosity. It's a safe place to ask questions, to make mistakes. I think that's such an interesting and accessible way, to start kind of, getting all of that in. So very cool. Okay. So what's one urgent action for leaders to evolve reskilling from noise to navigation, turning into a competitive advantage for engagement?
I think it all comes down to behavior. If you as a leader have been venting and taking all that vent onto your team, I think it's going to be very difficult to transform that particular team or that particular company into this highly leveraged environment that's excited about this next phase. A lot of people have taken this current stage that we're in and, mentioned that it's very similar to the start of the internet. It's that exciting. It's that big, right? If you think about what happened when the internet happened, a lot of people had very similar fears, very similar excitement. There were very specific opinions, right, about it. This is not that different. And yes, it is going to change the way we work. It is definitely going to transform how many companies operate day to day. However, I think if you can go on a journey with your team as a leader and create the necessarily psychological safety and trust first, figure out what behaviors needs to evolve and come along, I think those are the kind of leaders that's really going to be great examples of what this AI transformation, if I could even use that term, is going to look like. Yeah. And I think staying relevant is really difficult. This technology is changing so fast. However, it reminds me a lot of continuous iteration and improvement in the world of engineering. Many companies never took iteration as seriously in their engineering infrastructure, and others did. And the ones that did very often were able to ship much faster. We're able to produce really great features quickly. We're able to, attack bugs a lot faster, etc. This to me feels so similar, if I have to make a comparison, to continuous iteration. If you're willing to continuously iterate on the things that you're building now, it also helps you transform your actual technical skills. And by doing that, your adaptability is just a lot higher, right? So your open-mindedness to going on this journey is just going to help you upskill as an individual and as a leader a time faster. It's also basic leadership principles. How you manage down matters. If your CXO or your CEO team tells you something and you immediately, take that negative influence down to your team, it's negatively going to impact them.
Right.
But if you're that buffer, even if you have feelings, even if you're struggling to adapt, if you're able to manage upwards and still influence downwards positively, I think that is the key to what we're going through. It's not easy, but I think it's definitely going to help people to just come along for the journey and understand the paradox of this. Like, it is really difficult. It doesn't always make sense. But if you're open-minded, you could probably adapt to how this can look and work for you in your role and in your
Absolutely.
team. Yeah.
Well, and like you said, I mean, the willingness, and that's where behavior comes from. And I like how you said it's going on a journey together. So it's the leaders with everybody. Things are changing, but it's being open to it. It's going on the journey, and that's how you're going to succeed. And like you said, that will be the difference too. So absolutely. Okay, so Forrester warns of reskilling failures in AI shifts. What lightweight interventions like cross time zone project rotations are you using to compound engagement?
Great question. I found that non-engineers learn really well from non-engineers. So I mentioned earlier, imagine a financial analyst teaching a bunch of people in a CX team how to create a website through Claude Code. I think the transfer of skills there and the technical transfer of skills is just so much higher than an engineer trying to explain how to build a website in technical terms through applications like GitHub and using terms like pull request or markdown or etc. Right? But where I think a lot of this reskilling failures can actually succeed is by taking your highest potential non-engineers to work with your non-engineers that needs to develop, and your highest potential engineers to work with engineers that needs to develop, so that they can really cross that and breach that skills gap, because there's, of course, a gigantic technical skills gap. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I think the accessibility of being able to create very technical tools like building an application, a website, a platform, has never been as accessible as it is now for people like you and me. So Darcy, if you want to create a website, I feel like you and I would be able to vibe code today in the next hour and get it off the ground, right? And have a landing page and have a way to book a session with you and add an, I don't know, Apple Pay gateway to it, right? Within an hour. Yeah, or shorter, as long as we have a little bit of money for credits, right? And a few great applications. So I feel like I agree that there's a skills gap. On the cross-time aspect, teams that has worked asynchronously and with autonomy previously is not going to find this challenging. I think teams that hasn't and is so reliant on sync time, sync meetings are, of course, going to find this a very difficult period in time, because they'll also need that like sync training time. But if your teams are already working asynchronously and with high autonomy, it also gives them the space to be innovative, have, play, and those loops will then be closed in that way. But it depends on your company culture. I think that's what it comes down to.
Absolutely. Well, you see how the company culture affects everything, right? And like you said, having space is where innovation can grow, and space to play. And again, it's also where the mindset and behavior is, because like you said, we know we could create a website like that, but there's people that you kind of have in you. Oh, I don't have the skills for this. I have never learned that. That's very techie. That's something an engineer does. So now it's kind of realizing this, it is a huge shift in what people can do themselves, skills you didn't, think that you had, that now you can be a part of. So I think that's so interesting. So how can pulse surveys and tools like Culture Monkey help leaders track reskilling momentum and catch engagement dips early?
Yeah, so considering Culture Monkey has, especially in the pulse side, has these very quick, effective ways to get information. I think this is that core period where it's so important that as you go through this transition period, that you check back. And if you have a ton of people to speak to, whether that's 100, 200, 500, it doesn't matter your team size. You need to close the loop. Like, this is what I've created, and this is how people felt about it. And so I feel like tools like Culture Monkey can really come in now and very quickly close loops on what did we develop so far? How did that go? How did people experience it? What needs to shift, either rapidly or where we have time for? I think pulse surveys is still underutilized in the world of work. At a stage, probably in, 2023 to 2025, I constantly heard the term that, you know, people were resenting surveys because they get really tired of over committing or over surveying. But I think in this time where you're continuously trying to improve people's behavior skills, etc., it's probably one of the most useful tools to close the loop rapidly and pivot your training, your leadership coaching, etc. It's also probably a tool that managers and leadership needs to use way more often, and not just a HR person or a head of people. So I think it's a great way to establish where are we now, where do we need to go, what needs to pivot. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think, you know, in a way, the more common they are and used, it provides, again, that safe space to give your feedback, to feel like, oh, I, you know, had this thought during a meeting, but, you know, didn't get a chance to, you know, say, you know, ask me questions or say why I could have, you know, understood it better. So it kind of gives that more accessibility to provide your own feedback too, which is so valuable, and more quickly provide feedback too. So, well, Nadia.
Also committing. So Darcy, I wanted to add, also committing to those outcomes. So as you get that loop feedback, telling the company what you're going to do next based on the feedback they gave you, and then doing that, right? Yes. It doesn't help just doing a survey and saying thank you for participation. It's really about, great, people said, we have no idea what this means, or, you know, this current lightning talk really had no impact, or whatever the case may be, whatever feedback you asked for that you've returned. What are you doing with that feedback, and what actions are you taking next? And that is becoming a lot more rapid. I'm seeing it so much at places like Doist. The moment we get the feedback, we start working on that action. It's not something that can go stale for 6 months or 3 months, etc. Right? It's got to be continuously improving. Yeah,
exactly. It creates that positive loop, right? So then you want to give more feedback because you know it's going to be heard, and you're going to see changes and see active changes right away. And so it just continually provides that positive loop. So yeah, absolutely. Well, I could talk to you all day. I've so enjoyed our discussion, seriously. And, you know, thank you so much. Your insights were so sharp, practical, and exactly what global teams need right now to turn AI reskilling into a real advantage. It's clear, moving from skills chaos to lasting edge requires early detection, business-linked metrics, manager coaching, and lightweight habits that keep remote teams motivated and growing. And that's where Culture Monkey excels, with pulse surveys and real-time feedback that help leaders track reskilling progress and protect engagement across time zones. And before we end, Nadia, how can our listeners connect with you to keep this conversation going or share their own perspectives?
Yeah, they can reach me on LinkedIn. So it's just LinkedIn/Nadia Vatalidis. I'm happy to connect there.
Great. Okay, awesome. I definitely will too. And to all of our listeners, thank you so much for being here. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. That's a wrap for this episode of Culture Club X, powered by Culture Monkey. Until next time, I'm your host, Darcy, signing off.